probably heard the term HVAC when it comes to systems in a home. What HVAC stands for is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Obviously, every house has to have at least heat, and it may have air conditioning too. We're going to talk about basic components of the system and also some maintenance tasks that you as a homeowner should know. First thing is you need to know where your furnace is. Obviously, it can be in a lot of different places. It can be in the basement, it can be in a crawl space, it can be in a closet, it can be in an attic. For some of you, depending on where you live, it can actually be in your garage as well. Here in Colorado, they're always inside. Mine is in this little closet right next to my kitchen. I have a Janitrol mid-efficiency furnace. The difference between mid-efficiency and high efficiency is the amount of heat that is exhausted. If you ever have a furnace with a metal exhaust flue like this one, that means it's low efficiency or mid efficiency. You generally don't see low efficiency very often anymore. I would say 1 out of 100 maybe, because they started doing mid efficiency probably late 70s. So if you see a metal exhaust flue, that's usually an 80 to 85% efficient furnace, meaning 80 to 85% of the heat goes into the ducts, the rest is exhausted. If you see a plastic, usually white PVC pipe coming out of the top or the side, that means it's a high efficiency furnace. That's a 90 to 95% efficient furnace. That means more of the heat goes into the house and less goes out the exhaust. That's why you can use plastic. Another thing to be aware of is that most forced air furnaces are manufactured to be oriented differently depending on the application. Mine is sitting on the base, which is because it's in this closet. If yours is in a crawl space or possibly an attic, it will be on its side. And sometimes, because of the configuration, often in condos, you will see it actually upside down. All of those are fine because it just depends on the space that they have to install the furnace. Another concept I want to touch on briefly is called combustion air supply. It's a scientific term basically meaning you want fresh air coming from outside the home whenever you have a combustion appliance. So if you have a gas-fired water heater or furnace, boiler, there has to be air coming from outside the home for that flame to burn. Back in the day, it didn't matter. In the 50s, houses were so drafty, it didn't matter. But now we're building houses so airtight with great seals and lots of caulking and nice double pane windows that there isn't an adequate supply of combustion air inside the home. There are a lot of different ways you can get that air into the house. It can be 2 ducts like I have up here in the ceiling in this closet. You can have a high efficiency furnace has its own. It'll have 2 pipes, one exhaust and one brings fresh air in. You can just have a vent that goes outside. One thing that you can't have though, and when I say can't, I'm talking about the current standard. Doesn't mean your house is going to blow up or you're going to die of suffocation, but it just makes your furnace run more efficiently and it's the most currently recommended standard. A lot of people see a vent in a door. They're like, oh, that's combustion air. That's pulling air from inside the home. It has to pull air from the outside. It can be outside directly or indirectly, meaning you could have a pipe that goes up into your attic as long as the attic is ventilated properly. Same thing with a crawl space. If a crawl space is ventilated properly, you could just have an opening coming from the crawl space into the room where your combustion appliances are, and that will suffice for combustion air supply. Some people say that you should have your furnace cleaned and serviced by a professional once a year. There's nothing wrong with that. I think every couple years should be fine depending on your usage. But the one thing that absolutely has to be done on a regular basis is changing of the furnace filter. Most of you already know that, but there is a common misconception about furnace filters in that a lot of people think that the filter is to protect us from what's coming out of the furnace, but it's actually to protect the furnace from what's going in. The unfiltered air comes through the return duct, hits the filter, then it gets filtered out any particulates that might damage the furnace. Then it goes through either the heat exchanger or the evaporative coil, and then the heated or cooled air goes out into the house. Furnace filters come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes. Your furnace will have a specific size filter. When it comes to filters, most HVAC specialists agree, get the cheap ones and change them often. I change mine every 3 months. I do it the change of every season. That way it's easier for me to remember. Once a month is fine if you can remember. The problem with me with once a month, it's hard for me to remember. A lot of times people just put a recurring event in their calendar on their phone. It reminds them all the time. The furnace filter size for my particular furnace is 12 by 24. This is a fairly common size. I get mine at the grocery store. You can get them at hardware stores. You can order them online. But just make sure you have the right size furnaces. There's 12 by 24, 14 by 44, 20 by 25, 20 by 24. But most of the time your furnace will have something written on it telling you the size. If not, just pull the one out and it'll have the size written right on it. It's important that you use the right size. The biggest thing you don't want to do is use a filter that's too small. If it's too small, it will leave a gap, so now unfiltered air is going through the furnace filter slot into the furnace. The other thing that is absolutely critical that a lot of people don't know about is this arrow that's right on the side of the filter. This is the airflow arrow. Every filter has one, and every furnace, the airflow is relatively the same. The thing to keep in mind, this filter arrow always points toward the furnace. Remember, the air comes into the return duct, through the furnace, and out to the supply ducts. So this filter on my furnace, the arrow faces up. If your furnace is laying on its side, it might be oriented this way. If it's upside down, it could be oriented this way, but just remember, this filter arrow, the airflow arrow, always points toward the furnace. The other thing to keep in mind is the filter doesn't always have to be in the furnace. It can be anywhere in the house as long as the air gets filtered before it goes into the furnace. It doesn't have to be filtered right here. I have this little grate on mine that is the return. I could filter the air down there. If you have a furnace in your attic, sometimes the filter is in the ceiling of the bedroom. Sometimes there's 3 or 4 filters in the ceiling. If you have a house built in 1949 that has a crawl space that's really hard to get in and out of, but that's where your furnace filter is, you can have that changed to where the air is filtered from the return duct in the house. So now you don't have to crawl in the crawl space to change your filter. Now those are things I would definitely make sure to have an HVAC specialist take care of that. But the biggest thing about the furnace is change that filter. You would be shocked how many times I go into a house, and remember, I'm a home inspector. They know I'm coming, and they don't change the furnace filter. One of the most common defects that can happen is if the furnace filter gets too dirty, it gets clogged. So the furnace is struggling to pull air into the furnace. It causes it to overheat and shut down. This is called short cycling. So the furnace turns on and turns off and turns on and turns off. That can be corrected simply by changing the filter. Not always, but I had an HVAC guy tell me one time, quite often, if it's short cycling, he comes in, change the filter, and then everything's fine. The big takeaway from today is this is such an important part of your home. It's such an important system. Make sure to maintain it. Maintain it regularly, have it cleaned, inspected. You could get it certified by an HVAC specialist, but most of all, you have to change that filter. Your furnace may look different than this, but the basic steps are the same. First of all, you have to get to the filter. Mine is down in the bottom of what's called the blower chamber where the blower is. So I have to take off the top, which is that piece there, and then this piece just slides up, and you can remove that as well. Remember, when that blower door is off, your furnace will not work because it's got a safety feature to keep somebody from getting hurt. To remove my filter, they're all a little bit different. Mine doesn't have any clips to keep the filter in place, and the filter has to be held in place, so I actually just use tape. Peel the tape off, pull the filter out, and again, airflow arrow going up. You can see it's very dirty compared to the one I'm about to put in. And then you just reverse the process for putting the filter in. Make sure you keep an eye on that airflow arrow. Slide the filter into place, and then a little bit of masking tape. Make sure it sticks to the filter, and now the filter won't come up. And then you reverse the process. Put the blower door back on. This one can be a little tricky sometimes. And once again, make sure this door is on. If this door isn't on properly, your furnace won't work. Then you put the top piece back in place, those little clips, put it together. And that's how you change your furnace filter.